In Foxy Brown, I played Foxy Brown's boyfriend. I was an FBI man named Michael, and I get killed by the mob. They mow me down.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Foxy Brown avenges my death.
And
That's the whole story in a nutshell.
well, Antonio Fargas kind
Yes.
of rats you
Plays her
out.
brother, yes.
That's the great scene. You're walking around with bandages.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh, yes, yes.
So-
But that leads to the big love scene that we had.
Yeah, well, do you have any memories of that day? Come on, please.
No, I don't.
No?
It was just another day.
Just another day.
Yeah.
Well, what was it like working with Pam Grier? And
She's great. She's a lovely person, very professional. We had a very pleasant time.
now, what we'll lump these together. So you did Foxy Brown, Abbey, Brother in the Run. Now, at that point, it seems like, from my standpoint, that there were more roles being offered to black actors at that point.
Well, yes, of course. All of this is thanks to one man, Melvin Van Peebles, okay? What people have to remember is that Hollywood was down on its behind. MGM was going bankrupt. Movie companies were doing very badly. Very badly. It was in all the papers, Variety and everything. But along comes this guy. He had nothing to do with it. He didn't do it for them. He didn't do it with them. He came, well, you know the story of Melvin Van Peebles and what he did. But when they looked at what he did with so little, they realized there's an audience. We're desperate. They didn't do it out of any, civic-minded, or we got to make sure that these people get what we do.
Representation.
They were desperate. They would have clung to anything. And that's what they did. We were the anything that they clung to.
Now, Professor Woods, he talks about the Kerner Commission being a spark in terms of wanting to have more. The Kerner Commission came out and said that there were two Americas, one black, one white, and that a lot of it had to do with representation,
Sure.
black people not having an opportunity
Right.
to see themselves in the medium.
Right.
And I think that might have led to your being hired in Boston as a newscaster.
Perhaps. Could be. Could be.
Or maybe that was a little before. I'm not
I don't
sure.
remember. When was the Kerner Commission?
Right after the Watts riots, so 1967.
Okay, I was already hired in 1965.
Okay. Wow. Well, so you're really a trailblazer then.
Yeah, I suppose.
Talk about that.
Well, interesting thing is that it was Westing. I got to give them credit. It was their idea. They decided they wanted to hire the first ever black newscaster. And I happened to know a Westinghouse producer, and he passed the word on to me. And I got in touch with them, and I went to see them, and they had me. I did some writing when I was in high school. They had me call upon whatever powers I had to be able to create stories that were journalistic and interesting. And I got the job just like that, three-year contract. And while I was there, I was also offered a job at CBS. Now, I haven't told anybody this, but so maybe I won't tell it to you.
Okay.
But the point is, it was during Vietnam, and they wanted to send a black correspondent to Vietnam. I was already married, and I didn't particularly feel too great about going into a war zone. 2, I was against the U.S. participation in the Vietnam War, but nobody asked me. And it was essential to my getting that job, to becoming a foreign correspondent. I mean, had I done that, well, let me put it this way: Ed Bradley did it. And he became famous, as you know. He became one of the star reporters in the CBS Entourage. But it wasn't for me. But nevertheless, I did go to Boston. And we had the riots over the busing of black kids into white schools and everything. and the killing of course, Martin Luther King. I remember the night that it happened. And
Yeah, tell for a lot of people. A lot of people don't know, or they don't know where they were when that happened.
oh yeah, well, I'll never forget where I was. April 4th, 1968. Martin Luther King had been killed, and there was a kind of an uproar, kind of a feeling of Armageddon in a sense in the city. And it was important for me after I got off of work. I wanted to go into the black community. I didn't live in the black community. I lived in Cambridge, which is across the bay. But I wanted to go into the black community to see what was going on. I knew that I heard there was a meeting at this particular high school, Patrick J. Campbell High School. And when I got there, it was jammed with people. It was the event to go to. And it was jammed with people. And what I observed is that it boiled down to a dispute between those who wanted to go to the government and ask them to change the name of the Patrick J. Campbell School to the Martin Luther King Junior High School, and those who wanted to do it themselves. In other words, just take over. And it was a big clash, and it was the first and maybe the only time I got involved in local things. I went up on the stage, and everybody knew me, of course, because I was the only black face on television. I mean, everybody in the Boston area knew me. I was a kind of a celebrity. And I said to them, I've heard both sides, and I feel that both sides have merit. And what I would like to suggest is that I will go with you if you are willing to go to the school committee. I will go with you. And we will ask this, we will petition. And if they refuse us, I'll be the first person to climb up on that wall and put the name up. So what I was trying to do was to unite both sides. It worked for the night. So we the next day, to hedge my bet, I went to see the mayor. Now the mayor knew me. Everybody knew me, because I was the only black. I mean, in fact, all television news reporters are known by all the politicians. That's a given. But as being the first black newscaster, they certainly knew me. So I went to see Kevin White, who was the mayor at the time. And we were sitting in his office, and I explained to him what was going on, and telling him how important it was to them. And one way to avert confrontation and disaster was to do this. And what he did while I was there, he got on the phone with Patrick J. Campbell's widow, the widow of the white man the school was named after. And he told her that they want to take her husband's name out of there. But he put it in a way like, we're going to rescue your husband from this ghetto. This is the way politicians work. So he got her on
was that the first time you did something overtly political in
Yes.
your life? Okay.
Yes.
You tend to be... I know you spent a lot of time in Europe, so that must color...
Yeah. Well, I don't get the relevance. What are you saying?
Well, in terms of how you see race issues in America, like, from my standpoint, if you're in the 60s, it's like either you believed with Malcolm X or you believed with Martin Luther King.
I see. I understand your question. I thought you meant as a newscaster. Oh. No, the first time I did anything political, I think I was 8 years old, and my father was on the picket line. He was going to be on picket line to help those who were less fortunate get funds from the government. It was called Home Relief at the time. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you heard that, if you know that. So I wanted to go with my father, and we were supposed to be representing the poor. We were poor, there's no question about that. But being poor and looking poor are not always the same thing. So there was in order to make this effective, there was an old sweater that I had, kind of raggedy, that we had put on my dog. It was a sweater of mine. My dog was wearing it. We took the sweater off the dog and put it on me. And we went down to the office, and we picketed. That was my first experience.
That's a good
Certainly
early
not my
memory. And
Yes.
one not involving eye poking
Right.
and biting.
That's true. But I was politically involved in a lot of things prior to and during my career, yes.
Okay. In Boston, that was the same night James Brown performed on TV. So that
Exactly.
was a hot night.
Yes. No, it wasn't on TV. I don't believe it was.
Well, the James
No, it
Brown
was
concert
live.
was broadcast live on television to keep people in.
I don't know that it was live on television. I don't know because I didn't see it, but I know
Okay.
he was there for a performance, and
Yes.
he did the performance, and everybody was there. Everybody there enjoyed that, and it kept people from getting terribly angry. I don't know that it was televised,
Right.
but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, not at all. Okay, but back to Blaxploitation. Abbey.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any memories of working on that film? Or William Girdler, young guy.
Yes, very nice guy. He died long before his time. Obviously, it was obvious to all of us that Abbey was how can I phrase it? Abbey was an offshoot from The Exorcist. It was obvious to everybody. It was about a woman possessed, and a lot of the things that we did in the movie were reminiscent of The Exorcist. It was exploitation in its truest sense. He was exploiting this other movie. That's what he was doing. Well, there's a reason why you don't see the movie around, and that's the reason. They no, they brought the hammer down on him very fast. Mm-hmm. I don't think the movie's ever been released. I've seen them. I finally saw the movie first time in my life about 2 years ago.
Okay.
And that's a movie we did in '74 or something like that.
Okay. Any thoughts in terms of making it? Carol Speed, William Marshall.
Mm-hmm. Well, Bill Marshall
he
was a good friend, and nothing I could report to you. No.
Okay. Shot in Kentucky.
Yeah. Yes, it was. As a matter of fact, Lexington, I think it was. Yeah, it was in Kentucky. Yeah.
And kind of towards the tail end of the Blaxploitation cycle.
Yes. Yes. But it was meant to be part of that thing, that's all. It was a black version of The Exorcist.
Were you offered more roles during that period, or were you mostly busy on television at that point?
No, I was offered a couple of roles of it. The problem was that the people who were making these movies were white. They had no interest in black culture, black history, the aspirations of black people. They just wanted to make money. Mm-hmm. And I think that showed. What they did was, at the studios, they would take a script and they would give a white guy a first-time opportunity to direct. He knew nothing about directing, but he learned at our expense. And I won't even tell you what movies they were, but there were quite a few that Mm-hmm. They were done by people who had no background whatsoever. But they weren't giving them to black guys, you notice. They were giving them to white guys. They were the few exception. I mean, Hugh Robertson, I don't know if you remember Hugh. Mm-hmm. He was an excellent editor and director.
Yeah, Oscar winner, Oscar nominated director for Midnight.
Perhaps so, I don't remember. He did a movie called Melinda.
Love that movie.
You did?
Yeah.
For MGM. But he's one of the few that you could mention who directed black movies in Hollywood.
Yeah, there weren't that many. There was Michael Schultz.
Yeah, that's true. But he was later, actually.
Later. I'll see Gordon Parks and
Gordon Parks, yeah. But true.
Gordon Parks Jr. were and Melvin were the ones. But so yeah, by and large, Blaxploitation was helmed by white.
No question about it.
White filmmakers. So I mean, but you started your own production company at a certain point. Was that to?
Yes, but I wasn't making feature films. I was making industrial films and educational films, because I I mean, I had to learn somehow, you know. I couldn't just start off and make, you know, Lost in the Stars or something like that. No, it was an opportunity for me to learn and that's what I did.
But a lot of what you've done, I mean, in terms of being the pioneer, I mean, there's an article that I read where you were interviewed, and I mean, did you feel that some of the roles that you might have played were tokenism, or like a lot of times you were the only white character on a show, excuse me, let me rephrase. A lot of times you were the only black character on a show. I mean, did you feel like this was pushing things forward and opening doors, or was it just
I don't know. Combat was a show that ran for 7 years. Vic Morrow played the title role. I mean, the lead. The late Vic Morrow, wonderful guy, friend. And in the 7 years that it was on, I was the only black actor ever to be on that show. I was told later. It was not tokenism. I don't know why there weren't more. I'm sure that they had their reasons, which are not necessarily good reasons, but there it was. There you were, you know. It was like that. I played a prize fighter on a couple of shows. Well, it was a period things were changing, fortunately. Had I come along 10 or 20 years earlier, I would have had a much tougher experience. I wouldn't have been able to survive.
Why do you say that? Because
there were no opportunities. Look at Burt Williams. Burt Williams had to put blackface on. He was a black man, but he had to put on blackface. And the interesting thing about Burt Williams, I discovered after having looked at some of his stuff recently, he never did any, I never saw him do anything offensive to black people. He was funny, but he was never a clown. He was never making a fool out of his people, like so many others I could mention to you. And it must have been tough in the 30s and 40s to be, if you want to work at all. I mean, what did they have? Willie Best, Mantan Moreland, Stepin Fetchit. These were all clowns who embarrassed you, made you want to squirm and look the other way.
You felt that way when you saw those films?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Because our fates were tied to them. Because when white people saw them, they saw all of us.
So as a young child, would you go to a Tarzan movie? Did you have, was that your escapism? Or?
No, Tarzan wasn't as bad as some of these other things I'm talking about.
Okay. The coonery and buffoonery. And then a lot of that was blowing up. Well, what's your take on that quote-unquote Blaxploitation era?
Well, a lot of the films were trash as far as I'm concerned. It's true. But they served a purpose. You couldn't expect black filmmakers to start from zero and then do War and Peace. You know, you couldn't expect that. Some of the films were surprisingly good. My only fault I had with the films was the reason that Hollywood was making them, because prior to that period, it was an axiom in Hollywood: black films don't make money. Black films don't make money. That's what they used to say. And I remember there was a white producer that I knew named Charles Martin. He made a film called If He Hollers, Let Him Go. Do you remember the movie?
Mm-hmm. Raymond St. Jacques?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He told me he knew that was a lie. He knew that black films made money. He just knew they didn't want to make black films. That was the important thing. That's why they didn't make them, because they didn't want to make them. They didn't want us to be part of of real life. He made the films that he made, and he made money. Well, that's what he told me.
Well, talk about the value of seeing yourself
Yes.
in this media.
Yes. Yeah, that's an important thing that we lost. We never had back in those days. We never were able to see our images on the screen in ways that were uplifting or noble, or people striving to become better human beings or help one another. Or we never saw the black community on its feet. And it was as dangerous as a lot of the crack cocaine, as far as I was concerned.
Well, coming up at the time of television, I guess, like my grandmother's generation, she was born in 1918. She just wouldn't go to the movies. Like, her life really didn't revolve around entertainment in any kind of meaningful way. She was busy working.
Yes.
But when they put that box into everybody's house, it changed.
Of course.
Can you speak a little to that?
Well, the most important thing in this capitalist nation that we live in is making money. Everything else is secondary to that. Everything else is second to that. And the TV box represented an opportunity for the moneymakers to make money. That's all they cared about. That's all they care about today. I mean, look at the way CNN is pushing the debates tonight. If you watch CNN in the last few days, every minute they're plugging this debate.
Like a surprise fight.
Yeah, and now it is perhaps important, but it's not that important that they have to have a running clock telling you 14 hours and 23 minutes, as if something wonderful is going to happen at that hour. What's going to happen is they're going to make a lot of money in terms of advertising. That's all that counts. So you have to take most things with a grain of salt in this capitalist country.
We enjoyed it because it was an opportunity to see sexy black women, sexy black men, but overall, it was too much pimps, pushers, and prostitutes.
You know, we have major companies putting their money behind this. And I'm happy about that on one side of the coin. On the other side of the coin, I have a problem with it. Because from my experience, what I noticed is after it got more commercialized, and after it grew and it grew and it grew, the heart and the soul and the culture left.